Sergeant Ethan Calloway stood at rigid attention aboard the Orion cruiser Starfire, his sandy hair freshly trimmed for the mission briefing. The holoprojector flickered to life, displaying a lush green planet. Fern 14, Colonel Hawthorne began, her voice crisp. Our latest agricultural jewel and current headache. Your units being deployed there ASAP. Ethan's ears perked up at the mention of the farming colony. Images of his childhood on his family's farm flashed through his mind, a stark contrast to the sterile military environment around him. The colonel continued, an insectoid species has been ravaging crops across the southern continent. Local forces are overwhelmed. Your job is simple: protect the farms, eliminate the threat. Simple. Ethan almost snorted. Nothing was ever simple when it came to farming, let alone defending it from alien bugs. As the briefing concluded, Ethan's second-in-command, Lieutenant Juliet Spencer, sidled up to him. So, farm boy, ready to get your hands dirty again? Ethan grinned. More than you know, Juliet. More than you know. The descent to Fern 14 was smooth, but as soon as the transport doors opened, Ethan was hit by a wave of familiar scents: rich soil, growing plants, and the unmistakable tang of fertilizer. For a moment he was 10 years old again, following his father through fields of swaying wheat. Reality snapped back as his boots hit the ground. The fields before him were nothing like the ones from his childhood. Row upon row of crops stretched to the horizon, each plant identical to its neighbor, all swaying in perfect unison. Bit different from your family farm, Sarge Private Cooper quipped, taking in the vast agricultural expanse. Ethan nodded, a slight frown creasing his brow. Yeah, a bit too perfect, if you ask me. Their musings were interrupted by a high-pitched screech. In the distance, a dark cloud rose from the fields, quickly resolving into a swarm of insectoid aliens. Their chitinous bodies gleamed in the sunlight as they descended upon a nearby field, shredding plants with frightening efficiency. Contact, Ethan bellowed, raising his pulse rifle. Defensive formation now. The Marines reacted instantly, forming a semicircle and opening fire on the swarm. Energy bolts tore through the alien ranks, but for each one that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. As the battle raged, Ethan noticed something odd. The aliens weren't attacking randomly. They moved with purpose, targeting specific sections of the field while leaving others untouched. Using hand signals, Ethan directed his unit to herd the swarm away from the crops. It was grueling work, more like corralling wild animals than traditional combat. By the time the last alien fell, the Marines were drenched in sweat and ichor. Good work, people, Ethan panted, surveying the battlefield. But this was just the beginning. As if on cue, a group of colonists approached, led by a severe-looking woman in an immaculate white suit. I'm Administrator Alara Clinton, she announced, eyeing the Marines with a mixture of relief and suspicion. While we appreciate your assistance, I must insist you coordinate with colony security before engaging in any further actions. We have delicate operations that cannot be disturbed. Ethan felt a familiar prickle at the base of his neck, the same feeling he got when his father was hiding a bad harvest from the neighbors. Of course, Administrator, he replied smoothly. We're here to help, after all. As Clinton led them towards the colony's main complex, Ethan caught Juliet's eye. A silent message passed between them. Something wasn't right on Fern 14, and it wasn't just the bugs. The real war, Ethan suspected, was just beginning. 2 weeks into their deployment on Fern 14, Ethan found himself walking the perimeter of Field 37 with Jace Harding, a weathered local farmer who'd taken a liking to the military boy who actually knew which end of a plow to hold. It ain't natural, I tell you, Jace grumbled, gesturing at the perfectly uniform rows of crops. Used to be you'd get some variety, some character in a field. Now it's like they're all clones or something. Ethan nodded, his suspicions growing. When did things start changing? About 6 months back. New seed shipment came in and suddenly everyone's yields are through the roof. But the taste Jace spat on the ground. Ain't worth a damn. Their conversation was cut short by the blaring of alarms. In the distance, a massive swarm of insectoids rose from the forest, heading straight for the fields. Showtime, Ethan muttered, activating his comm. All units, converge on Field 37. Prepare for major engagement. The battle that followed was the fiercest yet. The Marines fought with practiced precision, their weapons carving swaths through the alien ranks. But Ethan noticed something odd. The swarm seemed almost frenzied, focusing on specific sections of the field with single-minded determination. As the last of the aliens fell, Ethan approached one of the targeted areas. The plants here were different, subtly so, but to his trained eye, the differences were clear. These crops were even more uniform, more perfect than the rest. "Lieutenant Spencer," he called out, "I need a full spectral analysis of these plants. Something's not right." Hours later, in the privacy of their makeshift HQ, Juliet presented her findings. "You were right, Sarge. These aren't just GMOs, they're something else entirely. The genetic structure is like nothing I've ever seen." Ethan's mind raced. "We need to find out where these came from. Juliet, take a team and check out the seed storage facilities. I'll have a chat with our friends in administration." But as Ethan approached the admin building, he saw Administrator Clinton hurrying away, a data pad clutched tightly to her chest. Acting on instinct, he followed her to a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the colony. Inside, he found a state-of-the-art laboratory hidden behind false walls. And there, projected above a workstation, was a symbol he recognized all too well: the crest of the Zyraxian Empire, Orion's most bitter rival. "Freeze!" Ethan shouted, his weapon trained on Clinton. But the administrator was quicker than he expected. She slammed her hand on a console, and alarms blared as files began deleting themselves from the system. "You're too late," Marine Clinton sneered. "Fern 14 was just the beginning. Our modified crops are already spreading across a dozen Orion worlds." Before Ethan could respond, the building shook with a massive impact. The insectoid swarm was back, and this time they were targeting the colony itself. As he raced out to join the defense, Ethan's mind whirled. The crops, the aliens, the Zyraxians, it was all connected. But how? And more importantly, could they stop it before it was too late? With the colony under siege and a conspiracy unraveling around them, Ethan knew that the real battle for Fern 14, and perhaps for Orion itself, was only just beginning. Ethan's voice cut through the chaos of battle, his words sharp and clear over the comm. "Listen up. Those modified crops are what's drawing the swarm. We need to use that to our advantage." As energy bolts lit up the night sky, Ethan outlined his plan. They would use the hyper-modified crops as bait, drawing the insectoids into a carefully prepared kill zone. It was risky, but it was their best shot at saving the colony. "Juliet, take your team and start moving those crops. Cooper, rig up as many sonic disruptors as you can. The rest of you, with me. We're going bug hunting." As his troops scrambled to execute the plan, Ethan turned his attention to the Zyraxian conspiracy. He tasked a small team with securing the hidden lab and rounding up Clinton's collaborators. The administrator herself had vanished in the chaos, but Ethan had a feeling they hadn't seen the last of her. Hours passed in a blur of frantic activity and bursts of combat. Finally, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, everything was in place. Ethan stood at the edge of the makeshift bait field, his pulse rifle at the ready. "Now we wait," he muttered. They didn't have to wait long. The insectoid swarm appeared like a dark cloud on the horizon, growing larger by the second. Ethan felt a bead of sweat trickle down his spine as he watched the aliens approach. "Steady," he commanded. "Wait for it." The swarm descended on the bait crops with terrifying speed, their chitinous bodies blanketing the field. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. Now. The air was filled with the screech of sonic disruptors and the staccato of pulse fire. Caught in the crossfire, the swarm writhed in confusion and pain. Ethan and his Marines pressed their advantage, their movements fluid and coordinated after weeks of fighting together. But the aliens weren't going down without a fight. A group broke off from the main swarm, heading straight for the colony's vital atmospheric processors. Ethan cursed, realizing the insects were smarter than they'd given them credit for. "Juliet, take your team and protect those processors. We can't let them compromise the air supply." As Juliet's team raced off, Ethan noticed movement at the edge of the battlefield. Administrator Clinton was making a run for it, heading towards a concealed shuttle pad. "Cooper, you're in charge here. I've got a loose end to tie up." Ethan sprinted after Clinton, his lungs burning as he pushed himself to the limit. He tackled her just as she reached the shuttle, both of them tumbling to the ground. "It's over," Ethan panted, pinning her down. "Your little science experiment is finished." Clinton laughed bitterly. "You think this was just about Fern 14? Wake up, Marine. The Xeraxians are already 10 steps ahead of you. This was just a test run." Before Ethan could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the colony. He looked up to see one of the atmospheric processors engulfed in flames. His heart sank, but then his comm crackled to life. "Sarge, we did it." Juliet's voice was breathless but triumphant. "We saved the main processor. Colony's atmosphere is stable." Relief washed over Ethan as he hauled Clinton to her feet. In the distance, he could see the remaining insectoids retreating, their swarm decimated by the Marine's trap. As the sun rose fully over Fern 14, Ethan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd won the battle, saved the colony, and uncovered a major Xeraxian plot. But Clinton's words nagged at him. This was just the beginning. In the days that followed, as they helped the colonists rebuild and prepared to return to Centrium, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of something much bigger. The modified crops, the weaponized insects, the Xeraxian infiltration, it all pointed to a looming threat, unlike anything Orion had faced before. As he boarded the transport back to Centrium, Ethan took one last look at the fields of Fern 14. He'd come here expecting a simple mission, a chance to revisit his farming roots. Instead, he'd stumbled into the opening salvo of what might become the biggest war of his career. With a grim smile, Ethan turned to his team. "All right, Marines, let's go home. We've got a report to file and a war to prepare for." The transport's doors closed, and as they lifted off from Fern 14, Ethan knew that the real battle for Orion, for humanity, for the future of the galaxy itself, was only just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.